Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the straw man fallacy. This is a very common fallacy that you see in argument, particularly political debates or theological debates, things like this. Basically, the straw man fallacy involves presenting a very weak or distorted version of the other side's position and then knocking it down as though you have then defeated the actual argument that that people on the other side are making. So this is basically the reason that this is a fallacy is that it misrepresents the argument that you are responding to. And so it is lying about the actual position held by the other side in order to make it look like your argument is stronger than it actually is. The problem, of course, with the straw man argument is that if your position was actually strong enough to disprove or counter or problematize the actual argument being made by the other side, then you would do that. But if you have set up a distorted or weakened version of what the other side is saying, then either you can't actually respond persuasively to what they're saying, or readers, listeners, viewers get the impression that you can't actually respond to it. So again, we see this a lot in politics. The critique, for instance, that Democrats are for open borders is complete nonsense. It doesn't actually align with any policy proposal put forward by the Democratic Party. It doesn't align with the actual policies created by Democratic presidential administrations or Congresses. It's simply untrue. But it's a much easier talking point to defeat than to deal with the actual political positions taken on by Democrats about border security. And it is true that Democrats tend to be more open about immigration, about providing amnesty, particularly to Dreamers, etc., etc. They tend to support more resources to help facilitate immigration claims, asylum claims, things like this, whereas Republicans tend to oppose all of those things. But if it's presented as Democrats have a nuanced position that has some value, but here are the reasons we disagree about the particular degree of border security, that's a much more complex argument. And so in our particular political landscape right now, which is all about sound bites and slogans and general stupidity, that's not going to go, right? People are not going to take an interest in the nuances of relative degrees of border security, border funding, how many immigration lawyers are employed, et cetera, et cetera. Those kinds of things are simply not going to drive engagement. So that's one element. The other element is then you have to actually persuade people that the relatively minor nuanced differences between your policy position and the other side's are actually worth the distinction. They're worth that person's vote. Whereas Democrats are for open borders, we want border security. Yeah, that's a much easier position to get people behind, assuming people don't actually think about it or look into the issue in any way, which of course the straw man fallacy always assumes. And so there is this element of it doesn't matter that in reality, no one seriously makes the argument that's being put forward here to be disproven. That's simply irrelevant. The straw man fallacy is built on wouldn't it be ridiculous if they did believe X? And again, this comes from all sides of the political spectrum, right? Like, Democrats misrepresent positions that Republicans hold, et cetera, et cetera. We see this in when theists critique atheists. We see this when atheists critique theists, et cetera, et cetera. We see this when Christians critique Muslims, et cetera, all of this across the board. We see these kinds of arguments all the time. The straw man is a very weak approach to argument because it is one of those things where it makes you and your position look weak. The idea of I'm knocking down the other side's argument is meant to make you look strong. But if all that you can knock down is straw rather than substance, it in fact makes you look a lot weaker. If you could knock down the substance of their argument, you would do that. If you can only knock down straw, then you can't knock down the substance of their argument.